Welcome back to Inside the Philippines. Tonight's story comes from a man called Peter Bezuidenhout, 52 years old when it started. South African, born and raised in Vanderbijl Park, that steel town south of Johannesburg where the air tastes like a workshop. 26 years working offshore, Angola, Nigeria, the North Sea, most of it operating cranes on rigs, which is a job where being careless once means somebody goes home in a box. So he wasn't careless. Not ever. That's the thing I want you to hold on to while you listen to this one. Peter came to the Philippines the way a lot of men do these days, not off a plane into a bar in Angeles City. He came through a screen, through 11 months of messages and video calls, through a woman in a small city in Samar who told him something about herself right at the start that he took as proof she was honest. And in a way, he was right. She did tell him the truth. That's what makes this one different. I'll say this much and no more. Peter is a man who checks things. He checks welds, he checks shackles, he checks load charts. There was exactly one thing in 4 years he never thought to check, and it cost him more than I'm comfortable saying out loud in an intro. This one's going to stick with you, especially if you've ever thought about building something in this country with your own 2 hands. Quick word before we start. After hearing so many of these stories on this channel, we put together a guide covering what we've learned from them. The documents, the questions, the things people wish they'd asked first. It's linked in the description if you want it. That's all I'll say about it. Here's his story, in his own words. My father worked at ISCOR. His father worked at ISCOR. In Vanderbijl Park, that's not a career. That's just gravity. You grow up with that orange dust on the windowsills and the sound of the plant going all night. And by 15, you know exactly which gate you'll be walking through. I went a different way, but only barely. I went offshore instead. 23 years old, first hitch out of Cabinda in Angola. And I remember thinking, well, this is the same thing but wetter. 28 days on, 28 days off. That was my life for a very long time. And I want to be honest with you about something, because people hear oil rig, and they think danger and money and helicopters. It's not really about that. It's about the schedule. Somebody hands you a rotation, and the rotation tells you where your body must be for the next 4 weeks. There's a lot of comfort in that. More than people think. Marlene ran everything else. Yeah, she ran the house in Mossel Bay, the accounts, the medical aid, her mother, the garden, all of it. And when I came home, she'd have the braai going and a list of 3 things she wanted fixed. And I'd fix them, and then I'd be gone again. We didn't have children. That's not a sad story. It's just how it worked out. She had a lot of nieces. I had the rigs. She was 44 when her left hand started doing this small thing when she was reading. Just a tremble. Nothing. She said it was the coffee. It was early onset Parkinson's. I came ashore. People say that like it was noble. It wasn't noble, Boet. It was logistics. You can't be 12 hours from a helicopter when your wife is losing her balance in the bathroom. So I took a shore job at the harbor that paid maybe 1/3 of what I was earning, and then I stopped that too. And then it was just me. 6 years. I learned things I never expected to know. I learned how to get a woman out of a bath when her muscles have decided not to cooperate. I learned that you feed someone from the side, not the front, so they don't have to tip their head back. I learned to plait her hair. She wanted it done properly, not just tied. And the first 100 times I did it, it looked like something a bird made, and she'd laugh at me in the mirror. I got good at it. That's the strange part. On got genuinely good at it. She died on a Tuesday afternoon in March, 2:10. And now I have to tell you the part one've never said properly to anyone. So bear with me. The funeral was fine. Everyone was very kind. Her sister organized the food, and there was too much of it. There's always too much of it. That was all fine. It was the Thursday after that got me. Because the hospital came for the bed. They fold it up, and they take it out through the front door, and suddenly there's this rectangle on the carpet where the bed was, lighter than the rest of the carpet, and the room is enormous. And I stood there in the middle of the lounge at maybe 9 in the morning, holding a laundry basket, and I realized I had nothing to do. Not that day. Not the next day either. 26 years of rotations and 6 years of nursing. And for the first time in my adult life, nobody had told me where to be. A man can handle hard. I want to be clear about that. Hard is fine. Hard has a shape to it. It's empty that breaks you. So I did what I know how to do. I made a plan. I sold the house. Got a decent price. Mossel Bay's gone mad in the last few years. Sold the Backy, the Hilux, which hurt more than the house did, if I'm honest, and I cashed out the Provident Fund. All in, it came to a bit under 3.5 million rand. Call it $200,000. Near enough. I put it in a standard bank account, and I didn't look at it. I'm going to be honest with you, viewer, sitting there wherever you are. I did not look at that balance for almost a year. Because that number was Marlene. That number was the house we bought in 2009 and the 6 years I spent not earning. You look at a number like that, and you have to admit what it's made of. Anyway, Danny Steenkamp Roughneck worked 2 hitches with me off Nigeria in the 90s, thick as a plank and one of the best men I've known. He'd retired and married a Filipina and gone to live in Cebu, and he used to send me photos on WhatsApp that I mostly ignored. Him at a place called Larsian, eating pork on a stick. Him at a christening in a shirt he had no business wearing. Him standing in front of a mercury drug with about 9 children. And one night, at about 2:30 in the morning, because I wasn't sleeping properly then, I actually looked at those photos. I looked at them for a long time. The next morning I phoned him and I asked him practical questions. Not about women. I asked him what a hospital costs there, and whether you can get medication reliably, and how bad the power is. Because that's what I know now. That's how I think. I'd spent 6 years learning what it costs to look after somebody in a place with no help, and I never wanted to be that far from a pharmacy again. He said the English is everywhere. Said it's a Christian country, church on every corner. Said the people look after their old, actually look after them, not the way we do it. Then he said, "Yeah, and there are a lot of good women there, Peter." I told him I wasn't interested in that. 2 weeks later I made a profile on a site called Christian Filipina. Not one of the other ones. I want that on the record. Because it mattered to me at the time, and it turned out to matter for nothing at all. I didn't want a holiday. I wasn't looking for a girl in a bar in Angeles. I was 52 years old and I was extremely good at looking after one person. And I had nobody left to look after. That's the whole thing, really. That's the entire story, right there at the beginning. And I couldn't see it. I'm going to tell you about the vetting, because that's the part that makes me look like the biggest idiot in the Southern Hemisphere, and I'd rather say it myself than have somebody else say it for me. I did it properly. That's the thing. Or, I thought I did it properly. You must understand how I'm built. On a rig, before you lift anything, you do a pre-start. You walk the machine. You check the wire rope for broken strands. You check the sheaves. You look at the load chart. You look at the sea state, and you sign a piece of paper saying you looked. 26 years of that. It's not a job. It becomes the shape of your head. So when I started messaging women on Christian Filipina in the winter of 2023, I made a spreadsheet. Yeah, a spreadsheet. Laugh, it's fine. I laugh too. Columns for name, age, location, what she says she does, what she says about family. I ran the photos through Google reverse image search. You drag the picture in, and it tells you if it's stolen off somebody's Instagram. 3 of them came back as models from Vietnam, which tells you something. I asked the same question 3 months apart to see if the answer moved. Where did your father work? How many kilometers to the hospital? What was the name of your primary school? If the answer wobbled, I stopped replying. 9 women in the beginning, then 4, then Maravich de Cuicuy, 38 years old, from Calbayog City in Samar, which, if you don't know, the Philippines is not the tourist part. It's up the west coast of the island, ferries and buses, and a lot of rice and coconut and rain. She was a barangay health worker, which is a sort of community health assistant attached to the local council, weighing babies, running vaccination drives, doing the rounds on the diabetics who won't take their tablets. Eldest of 6. Her father died when she was 22. And here's what got me right at the start. She didn't talk about money. She talked about work. Actually, no, that's not quite right. She talked about work the way I talk about work, complaining about the logistics of it. There was one message, I still remember it, about a vaccination drive after a typhoon where the cold chain broke because the generator at the health center ran out of diesel, and they lost a whole batch of vaccine, and she was properly furious about it. Not sad, furious about diesel. Poet, I have been furious about diesel my entire adult life. We did video calls at ridiculous hours because I wasn't sleeping. I'd be sitting in my sister's spare room in Vereeniging at 2 in the morning, and she'd be at her kitchen table with the light of a phone on her face, and roosters going in the background. Roosters at 4 in the morning, every single call, and I'd say the roosters early, and she'd say, "No, sir, that's the second one. The first one starts at 3. There'd be karaoke sometimes, way off. Somebody murdering a Whitney Houston song 2 houses down. Her nephew wandering past in a school uniform. All of it very ordinary. She asked me nothing. Not for the first 3 months. Nothing. Then month 3 happened. She called me, and she'd been crying already. Before she called, you could see it. And she told me she was married. Married at 19. A man called Ronnie, from Calbayog also. He left for Manila when she was 22, went to work in construction, and there was another woman there. And that was that. 16 years. No contact except through his mother. And then she explained the thing that I did not know, that I think most men watching this don't properly know until it's them. There is no divorce in the Philippines. None. It's the only country on earth besides the Vatican that doesn't have it. If you're married there, you're married. Your only way out is an annulment, which is a court case, and a court case costs money. 300,000 pesos, 400, more, and takes years. So there are millions of Filipinas walking around who are legally married to a man they haven't seen since the Aquino administration. She was crying, and she said, "I'm telling you now because I don't want you to find out later." She said, "I would rather lose you today than lie to you. Now. I want you to sit with what that did to me, because everything after this, every rand, every peso, every month of my life for the next 3 years, comes out of that one phone call. A person who is running a con does not hand you her worst secret in month 3. She hides it. That's the whole nature of a con. So when this woman phoned me up and voluntarily told me the single most damaging thing about her situation, unprompted, when she could easily have said nothing at all, I did not think, this is a problem. I thought, this is character. I thought, right, this is an honest one. That was my pre-start inspection. That was the whole thing. I checked the sheaves and the wire rope, and I never once looked at whether the case existed. Anyway, she then said the other thing that finished me off. She said she didn't want me to send money for it. She said, please, no, that's not why I told you. I sent nothing for another 2 months. She didn't ask again. And in those 2 months, something changed in how we spoke. It stopped being romance, if it ever was. It got practical. I asked her how far the nearest proper hospital was. Katbalogan, 2 hours on a bad road. I asked whether Mercury Drug in town keeps stock or runs out. I asked about the brownouts, how often, how long, whether anyone in the barangay had a generator that actually ran. She thought I was strange for asking. I told her about Marlene. Not all of it. Enough. Because here's what nobody understands about those 6 years. I got good at it. I got genuinely, properly good at looking after a human being who could not look after herself. And then she died. And that skill just sat there in me, with nowhere to go. Like a crane on a stacked deck. Marovich's mother had kidney failure. Dialysis twice a week in Katbalogan. You see it. Of course you see it. You're sitting there watching this, and you can see exactly what I was doing, and I could not see it at all. She asked me whether I could cook. I said I can do a braai, and I can do a pot of samp and beans, and that's about the range. She said her mother would fix that. I started reading. Properly reading, the way I'd read a maintenance manual. The 13A marriage visa, permanent residency for the foreign spouse of a Filipino citizen, needs a valid marriage, needs the PSA documents. Annulment procedure, average duration 2 to 5 years. I made notes. I gave the whole thing a lead time in my head, like a shutdown. 18 months for the court, 3 months for the visa. I phoned Danny in Cebu and told him about her. He was quiet for a bit, and then he said, Samar, hey, that's far from anything, Peter. And I said, yeah, good. That's what I said. Good. Because that's how a man who has spent his life on rigs hears the words far from anything. In June 2024, I booked Johannesburg to Manila, Manila to Tacloban. Then I went to a mall in Vanderbilt Park, and I spent 2,000 rand on pasalubong, which is the gift you're expected to bring, and you'd better bring it, for a family of 6 people I had never met. Chocolates, perfume for the mother, a rugby ball, because I'm an idiot, for boys who only play basketball. The heat at Tacloban comes at you through the door of the aeroplane. I've worked West Africa, so I thought I knew heat. This is different. This is wet heat. It sits on you like a jacket. And the airport smells of jet fuel and cut grass, and something sweet I never identified in 3 years of going there. She was standing at the barrier with 2 of her brothers, Junjun and Toto, and she had a piece of cardboard with my name on it. Bezuidenhout. Spelled correctly. You'd be amazed how rarely that happens in my own country. She was smaller than I expected. That's the thing about video calls. You never get scale. And she didn't run at me the way you see in those airport videos. She stood there and she went a bit red, and she said, "Sir, you came." I said, "Yeah, well, I booked a ticket." That's what I said. 38 hours of traveling, 11 months of my life. And that's what came out of my mouth. Junjun took my bag off me like I was 90 years old, and that was that. Then there was the road. Tacloban to Calbayog is a long day. You cross the San Juanico Bridge out of Leyte into Samar. And after that, it's 5-6 hours of a 2-lane road that goes through every single town. and every town has a market on the edge of it, and the van's brakes are worked hard. Sacks of copra on the roadside, coconut everywhere, and I mean everywhere, hills of it. Dogs asleep in the middle of the road that don't move for anything. A basketball court in every barangay, some of them with no roof and no lines painted, just a hoop nailed to a post, and 8 boys playing in flip-flops in the rain. We stopped at a Jollibee in Catbalogan, and Toto ate 2 pieces of chicken with rice like a man who'd been working. And Maravich didn't eat because she was too nervous, and I had a coffee that tasted like a hot sweet. Their house, the family house, on land her grandfather had, was concrete block up to about waist height, and then plywood, and corrugated iron above that, with a Bahay Kubo bit on the side where the cooking happened. Neighbors' karaoke going before dark. Roosters, which I now knew started at 3 and not 4. Within 40 minutes of arriving, I was on my back under the kitchen with a torch. I'm not being a hero here. I want to be clear. This is not generosity. This is what I am. The hand pump was slack because the leathers had gone, which is a 20-minute job if you have the leathers. And it turned out somebody in the barangay had the leathers. The wiring in the back room was a piece of flex twisted onto another piece of flex and wrapped with plastic tape, feeding a fan and a rice cooker off one point, and I nearly had a stroke in Ware. 2 days later, I had that room on its own circuit with a proper breaker, and I'd been up on the roof, and I'd told them which purlin was going to go in the next big blow, and I told them to move the good rice sacks off the floor, because that floor floods, and they knew it flooded, and they'd just accepted it. I was Boet, so happy. That's the part one can say now, and couldn't say then. 7 years since Marlene got properly ill, and for 3 weeks in a hot house in Samar with brownouts every afternoon, there was a list of things that needed doing, and I was the man who did them. Somebody would come and get me. Tito Pete, the light is not working. Tito Pete, look at this. Tito Pete. That's what the children called me by the second day. Nobody appointed me, nobody asked. I was just absorbed. There was no courtship in it at all. Her mother handed me a plate before she handed anyone else a plate, which in that culture is a whole sentence, and I only worked that out much later. The mother, Nane Lilia. Kidney failure. Dialysis twice a week at the hospital in Catbalogan, which is that 2-hour road each way. And she'd been doing it for 4 years. She spoke no English to speak of. On my second night, she took my hand in both of hers and said a long thing in Ware, with her eyes shut, and I stood there like a post. And Maravich translated it as, "She says thank you, and God sent you." I asked Maravich later what she actually said. Maravich said, "More or less that." I don't think it was more or less that. I think it was longer, and I think it had my dead wife in it somehow. And Maravich edited it because she thought I couldn't take it. Which is one of about 4 things in this entire story, where I still can't tell you whether I was being cared for or handled. Sunday, church. Not the big cathedral, the little parish one. Plastic chairs at the back for the overflow. Ceiling fans. Everyone in their good shirt. And it went on a long time. Afterwards, a woman from the parish council took me aside and told me very sincerely that this was God's plan, that Nane Lilia had prayed for 4 years. And here I was. I'm Dutch Reformed by upbringing and lapsed by profession. Nobody has ever said anything like that to me in my life. It knocked me sideways, and I want to say plainly, I don't think she was working me. I think she meant every word. That's what people don't understand about that country. The sincerity is real. It's just that sincerity and a con can live in the same house and pay the same rent. Which brings me to Ronnie. Second week. A van pulls up, a decent one, and a man gets out in a polo shirt, 40s, thick through the shoulders, and Maravich goes very still and says, "That's Ronnie." He came over and put his hand out. I shook it. Of course I shook it. What are you going to do? Sit there. And he was, I'll say it straight, he was pleasant. He drove the three of us to a notary in town that week because Maravich needed some document sworn for the annulment, and he was, apparently, cooperating. He waited outside the church one Sunday rather than come in, which I thought was tactful. He said to me, in good English, standing by the van eating boiled peanuts out of a bag, that he wanted Maravich to be happy. He said it like a man closing a file. I thought, that is a decent man doing the right thing. In my own country, a man in that position keys your car. I never asked him a single hard question. Not one. I checked the wiring in that house before I checked my own feelings about anything, and I certainly never checked him. 3 weeks, and I flew home. Before I left, I set up the support, P18,000 a month, which is about $800. And I want to say this properly, because people watching this will scoff. That was not extortion. That was rice and school fees, and the dialysis transport for a family of 6, where the eldest daughter earns maybe $6,000 a month, doing genuinely useful work. Every OFW in that country sends money home. I was just the version of that, who arrived by plane. Second visit, January 2025. Nana Lilia had gone into hospital with an infection in the fistula, and between that admission and the dialysis and the van hire, across the 2 trips I put in about $240,000. Call it $77,000. Receipts for some of it. Photographs of a hospital bill for the rest. At the end of that second visit, sitting on plastic chairs with a San Miguel going warm, we agreed we'd start the annulment properly. Her cousin knew a lawyer in Tacloban. I said I'd rather fix a problem than walk around it. Everyone at that table agreed with me. The lawyer's name was Ati Lumbre, cousin of a cousin, office in Tacloban, above a shop that sold rice cookers and school shoes. I want to describe that office to you because it's important, and I only understood why much later. 1 room, quite dark, 3 desks in it, a window unit dripping into a bucket, framed certificates on the wall, a woman at the front desk with a ledger book and a stapler, and about 400 folders in stacks on the floor. It looked exactly like every small legal office I've ever been in anywhere, and that's the point. It looked completely normal. He said P350,000 all in. That's about R112,000. He said 18 months, maybe 2 years, depending on the court's calendar. And I did what I have done my whole working life, which is I wrote it down, and I made a schedule. You must understand that this was, to me, a project. Not a romance. A project with a scope and a budget and a critical path. I have planned rig shutdowns. You know what a shutdown is? You take a producing platform offline, and you have 28 days to do 900 jobs, and every single one of them has a cost code. That's what I know. Somebody says a number and a duration, and I build a bar chart in my head, and then I go and get the money out. So, the bar chart. First there was the psychological evaluation, which, this is real, this is genuinely how it works there. The whole legal basis for most annulments is psychological incapacity. So a psychologist has to interview and write a report. P65,000. Then filing fees. Then the docket fee. Then something called publication, which is real too. You must publish the petition in a newspaper of general circulation. And that came in at P45,000, which struck me as a lot for a newspaper nobody reads. Then the sheriff's fee. Then the commissioner's fee. Then, in about April 2025, The hearing was reset because the judge was on leave. Then, in July, the judge was reassigned to another branch entirely, which meant the case had to be re-raffled, and this cost money. Then in October, the file was lost. Not the case. The file. A physical folder. And it had to be reconstituted, which is apparently a thing that has a name and therefore a price. $80,000. I paid every single one of those. Over about 2 years, by the time it was all said and done, the annulment came to $780,000, 250,000 rand, for a court case that did not exist. Say that number out loud in your head. I have to say it out loud sometimes, in the cabin, at night, just to make it stay real. Now here's the question you're all shouting at the screen, and it's the right question. Peter, you soft idiot, did you never go and check? No. And I'll tell you exactly why not. And it's not one reason, it's about 6 small ones stacked up. 1. I never once met Lumbre alone. Never. Every appointment, Maravich was there, and usually Ronnie drove, because he had the van, and I don't drive there. You don't drive there. You've seen the road. And when they talk to a lawyer, they talk in Waray. The lawyer would speak English to me, and then he'd turn and go into Waray with them for 2 minutes, and turn back and say, "Okay, sir, we are proceeding." Nobody ever excluded me. It's just that the actual conversation happened in a language I don't have, and everyone was extremely nice about it. 2. I couldn't read the documents. Some of them were in English, the legalese kind, all "comes now the petitioner," and some of them were forms with stamps and initials. I have looked at those photos since. Some of them are real templates. Some of them are, I now think, from another case entirely with the names changed. 3. Receipts. I asked for receipts. What I got was photos of receipts, screenshots, Gcash confirmations, a photograph of a handwritten acknowledgement on a piece of paper with a signature on it. And here's the thing I need to say honestly. That is not unusual there. Provincial transactions do run on that. Half the legitimate business in that country happens on a photographed handwritten receipt. So the thing that should have screamed at me was camouflaged by the fact that it's genuinely normal. 4. I did ask for a case number. Once. That's the one that gets me. Around the middle of 2025, I said, "Right, give me the docket number and the branch." And Lumbre wrote it on a piece of paper for me. Civil case no. Something. RTC branch something. Calbayog City. I put that piece of paper in my wallet, and I carried it around for a year. Boet, I have refused to lift a container off a supply boat because a shackle didn't have a legible SWL stamp on it. Held up the whole deck. Made myself unpopular. 2-ton shackle, and I wouldn't take the fitter's word for it. I took a lawyer's word for the existence of a court case. Never phoned the court. Never walked into the building, which was 40 minutes from the house. Never. Because it was on a piece of paper with numbers on it. And that's what verification looks like to a man like me. Numbers on paper. Meanwhile, the rest of it was growing. The monthly support went from $18,000 to $25,000, or $8,000 a month, because of the dialysis and because Toto started at a technical college in Katbalagan. Balikbayan boxes twice, which is a whole thing. You fill a box the size of a bar fridge with soap and chocolate and second-hand clothes and shoes, and you ship it. And it takes 2 months. And I enjoy doing it. I'll be honest with you. I enjoyed choosing the stuff. August fiesta in the barangay. I was asked to help. I said, "How much?" They said, "Whatever you can." I put in $40,000, and there was a pig, and about 180 people, and somebody sang Air Supply for 40 minutes on a rented sound system. Genuinely one of the better nights of my life. Then I was asked to be a godfather at a baptism. Ninong. I said, of course, I was flattered. Nobody explains to you beforehand that being a ninong is not ceremonial. It's a financial position. Christmas, tuition, emergencies, for the child's entire life. I found this out afterwards from Danier, who laughed at me down the phone for a solid minute. A niece's tuition, $35,000 a semester. 2 medical emergencies over Gcash. A cousin's appendix, $48,000. And something with Nane Lilia's fistula again, $60,000. Those 2 I have no doubt about at all. Those were real. That's what I need you to hear. Most of it was real. The dialysis was real. The college was real. The pig was real. The appendix was real. The eldest daughter carrying 6 people on her back was completely real. And that's not a Filipino scam. That's a Filipino life. And any man who goes there and calls that a scam is a man who hasn't looked at what a barangay health worker earns. The fraud was one thread running through the middle of it. That's why I couldn't see it. You don't find a bad weld by looking at a wall. Small things. She wouldn't answer her phone certain weekends. Typhoon, brownout, health duty, a relative in Manila. All plausible, all sometimes true. Ronnie kept being around. At the fiesta, at the baptism, driving. Small town, everyone's cousins. What do you want the man to do? Move. And her cousin B. Bang said to me, twice, at 2 different gatherings, half laughing, "Sir, you are very lucky Ronnie is so kind." Twice. And I laughed and agreed with her. Then, in November 2025, Lumbre phoned me in South Africa and said it was in the final stage. Decision pending. Just one more filing. He said that phrase so many times I could do it in his voice. And I sat there in Vereeniging in my sister's spare room, 53 years old, with about R2 million doing absolutely nothing in a standard bank account. And I thought, right, the paperwork's nearly done. Time to build the house. Here's the thing nobody warns you about. It wasn't greed that finished me. It was competence. Because I'll tell you what I am actually good at. I'm good at building things that don't fall down. And I had been sitting in my sister's spare room in Vereeniging for 2.5 years watching 2 million rand do absolutely nothing in a standard bank account. And every time I looked at that balance, I saw 6 years of my life and a woman's hair being plaited. And I wanted it out of there. I wanted it turned into something that stood up. So in December 2025, I flew back with a roll of paper and a set of pencils. I designed that house myself, on a drawing board on my sister's dining table, over about 5 weeks. And Boet, it was a good house. Elevated slab, 700 millimeters up, because that whole area takes water, and the family had been mopping their floor twice a year for 30 years. Proper reinforced tie beams at the top of the walls, which nobody there does, because when Yolanda came through in 2013, what killed the houses was the roof leaving and taking the walls with it. Hurricane straps on every truss. A 5,000-liter tank on a stand with a proper concrete footing, so you have water in a brownout. A slab at the back for a generator with the conduit already run. 3 bedrooms, a kitchen with a run of tiled counter at the height Nanay Lilia could work at sitting down. Because a woman on dialysis has bad days. I sat on that site for 4 months. Every day. Bought the cement myself from a place on the National Road, checked the rebar diameter with a vernier, sent 1 load of sand back because it was full of salt and shells. There was a young mason, Dodong, 24 years old, best set of hands I've worked with anywhere. And I taught him how to read a level properly, and he taught me about 20 words of Waray, most of them rude. It rained every afternoon at 3. We'd sit under the tarp and drink Coke out of the glass bottles from the sari-sari next door and wait it out. I want to be very clear with you. That was the happiest I have been since about 2016. The numbers: P4.2 million for the house, R1.34 million. Then the lot next door, which came up for sale while we were building, and the family said we should take it because it was the last flat piece, P900,000, R290,000 hudyels. Then 300,000 for a tricycle for Junjun to run as a school route and stock, and a proper counter for a Sari Sari store for Toto. Titled in her name. All of it. Now, before anyone types it, I knew. I want that on the record. I knew before I spent 1 peso that a foreigner cannot own land in the Philippines. It's in the Constitution. It's the first thing that comes up if you spend 10 minutes reading. And I had spent a great deal more than 10 minutes. I knew about condos and the 40% rule. I knew about the company structures, the 60-40 thing, and I'd read enough to know those get knocked over in court. I asked Lumbre about it. I said, must we not have some kind of agreement? A lease on the land in my name. Something. He waved his hand. He said, Sir, once you are married, it is conjugal property. There is no problem. Which is, and I've had this explained to me properly since, not how any of that works. Not for the land. But he said it in an office with certificates on the wall, and Maravich was sitting right there nodding. And I had already handed that man 750,000 pesos over 2 years. So what was I going to do? Disbelieve him now? That's the trap in the whole thing. Every stupid decision I made was protected by an earlier stupid decision. Then, in March 2026, Lumbre produced the certificate. Decision of the court. Marriage declared null. Entry of judgment. Stamps on it. There was a small party at the new house. The house was finished by then, painted a sort of pale green Maravich chose. And there was Lechon, and about 60 people and air supply, again on the same rented sound system. And Nanay Lilia held my hand and cried. And the parish priest came by in the afternoon, and we talked about a church blessing for the following year. Because the church annulment is a whole separate process. Did you know that? 2 systems, 2 sets of fees. I looked at that certificate for a long time that night. It was a photocopy. That's the thing. Not an original with a dry seal you can feel with your thumb. A photocopy, and not even a straight one. The edge was skewed, and there was a gray band down one side where the glass had been dirty. And a court decision, a real one, is a document you can hold and feel. I've seen documents my whole life. Manifests, certificates, lifting registers. I said, is there an original? She said, the lawyer keeps the original. And I said, yeah, no, fine. Then, in April, I flew home to sort out my side for the 13A, the marriage visa. That's a real process, with a real list. My birth certificate, police clearance, the SAPS-1, apostilled, medical, and the PSA marriage certificate once we married. You must go to the Bureau of Immigration in Manila, on Magallanes Drive in Intramuros. You go in person. I said to her on a video call, right? So we'll meet in Manila. We do the immigration together. Then we come back and we marry. And she said the thing. She said, Sir, it's already handled. I asked what's handled. She said, the paperwork. The lawyer will courier everything. You don't need me there. It's very expensive to fly to Manila. Now understand, she'd never once resisted anything logistical. Not in 3 years. She'd sat in that lawyer's office 15 times. And suddenly Manila was expensive. 2 other things from that trip. Ronnie was at the house, openly. Twice while I was there, once in the morning, and Maravich said he was helping Toto set up the store. He knows suppliers in Catbalogan. And I thought, fine. The store needs suppliers. And a neighbor, an older woman, spoke good English, worked in Saudi for years. She was at the fence one afternoon, watching me put a gate hinge on. And she said, Very pleasant, sir. How long are you staying this time? This time? I said about 3 weeks. She nodded and looked at me for a second longer than she needed to, and went inside. That's it. That's all of it. A crooked photocopy. A woman who suddenly didn't want to fly. A man being helpful about suppliers. And a neighbor with a question. I flew to Manila at the end of that month, and I sat in a hotel on Roxas Boulevard with the aircon rattling and the traffic going all night. And I had this, I don't have a word for it, not a thought. On a rig, you get it in your feet. You feel something in a machine before you can name it, a vibration through the deck, and you stop the lift and you go and look. I have stopped a lift for less than what I was feeling in that room. I sat on the end of the bed, and I said out loud, to nobody, "Yeah? No, it's fine." And then I went to immigration in the morning to start the paperwork. The Bureau of Immigration on Magallanes Drive is a queue in a building that was hot before air conditioning was invented. You take a number, you sit on a plastic chair under a ceiling fan, and there are about 200 people in there doing the same thing in 9 different languages. I got to the counter, and the woman went through my folder. Birth certificate, apostilled, good. Police clearance, good. Medical, good. Then she said, "Sir, and the PSA documents for your fiancé, her birth certificate and her CENOMAR." I said, "What's a CENOMAR?" She said, "Certificate of No Marriage Record, from the Philippine Statistics Authority. Or if there was a marriage, then the marriage certificate with the annotation of the annulment." She said it very normally, the way you'd say, "Bring your ID." I said, "The lawyer's couriering it." She said, "You can also get it yourself, sir. PSA Cerbilis, or the office in Quezon City. 2-3 days. And I said, "Right. That's it. That's the whole hinge of my life. Right there. A woman behind a counter being helpful, and a man with nothing to do for 3 days in Manila. I want you to understand that I did not go and do that because I was suspicious. I want to be honest about that, because it would flatter me to say I finally listened to my gut. I did it because I had 3 days, and because a document in my own hand is worth more than a document somebody promises to courier, and because that is simply how I have operated since I was 23 years old. If you can inspect it yourself, inspect it yourself. I filled in the form. I paid a few hundred pesos. 330, I think, plus the courier. Less than a bucket of chicken joy. Then I waited, and I went and looked at the old walls in Intramuros like a tourist, and I ate at a Mang Inasal because I liked the chicken oil on the rice, and on the Thursday it came. There was no annulment annotation. There was a marriage. Marivich da Cuy Cuy and Ronaldo, Ronnie, married at the parish in Calbayog in 2006, registered, subsisting. No annotation. Nothing. Under Philippine law, a marriage stays live on that record until a court says otherwise, and the court order gets annotated onto it. And there was nothing on that page but a marriage. And then the other thing, further down, the addresses. Both spouses. Same barangay address. The address of the house I built. I sat in that hotel room on Roxas with that paper on the bed for 2 days. 2 days, Boet. I didn't phone anyone. I read it about 40 times. I put my reading glasses on and off. I got a second copy, a different way, through the online Cerbilis thing, in case the first was wrong. It wasn't wrong. Then I phoned the regional trial court in Calbayog and asked about a civil case number that I had been carrying in my wallet for a year on a piece of paper. The woman on the phone was very patient with me. She looked. She said, "Sir, that number is not the format we use." Then she checked the docket for the branch anyway, by name, both names, going back 3 years. No petition. Never filed. Nothing. Here's what I keep trying to explain to people, and I don't think I do it well. There was no moment of discovery. I know that's how these stories are supposed to go. The phone left unlocked, the message on the screen. It wasn't like that. That paper didn't tell me anything new. Every single thing I needed had already been handed to me, and I had put it somewhere else. The photocopied certificate with the crooked edge. Suddenly she can't fly to Manila. Ronnie at the notary, Ronnie at the fiesta, Ronnie helping with suppliers. Bang twice. Sir, you are very lucky Ronnie is so kind. The neighbor. How long are you staying this time? Every appointment in Waray with a nod and an okay, sir. We are proceeding. Weekends of nothing, then a storm to blame. 780,000 pesos of court fees for a court that had never heard the name. The paper just took all of it and stacked it in one place, so I couldn't put it down. On the third day, I flew to Tacloban without telling anybody. First stop, the office above the rice cooker shop. Same door, same stairs, 3 desks. And the woman at the front, a different woman, looked at my folder of screenshots, and she was polite and confused, and she said, Atty. Lumbre used the desk sometimes, he wasn't a partner, and she didn't know my name, and there was no file. There was no file. There were 400 folders on that floor, and not one of them was mine. I want to tell you what I felt standing in that stairwell, and I can't, because I don't think I felt anything yet. It was more like reading a gauge that says a number it cannot possibly say, and just standing there looking at it. I took a van to Calbayog, 5.5 hours. Copra on the roadside, dogs in the road, the same boys on the same basketball court in the rain. I didn't message her. I got to the house at about 4 in the afternoon. My house. Pale green, tank on its stand, gate hinge I put on myself. There was a tricycle parked under the carport that wasn't Junjun's, and the sari-sari was open, and Ronnie was sitting on a plastic chair in my carport in a singlet with his feet up on a sack of rice. He stood up. He didn't run. He didn't look particularly worried. Maravich came out of the kitchen with the low counter, and she went white, and I have never seen a person's face do that so fast. I put the Cenomar on the plastic table, and I asked one question. I said, was there ever a case? That's all. One question. Once. I didn't raise my voice. I've never raised my voice in my life. Not on a deck with a load swinging, not at my wife when she was dying, and I wasn't going to start in front of a sari-sari store in Samar. She started crying. Properly. Not performance crying, I don't think. Although, who am I to say what I can and can't read anymore? She said, Peter, sir, please. And then she said a thing that I still cannot get out of my head. She said, you were never lied to about the marriage. And she's right. That's the horrible part. She's completely right. She told me in month 3. She told me the truth up front, and then she used it. And the truth was the door, and everything after that was the room. Then Ronnie answered for her. Calm, reasonable. In good English, the way he always spoke to me. He said the annulment is very expensive, sir. We could never afford it. He said Maravich's mother needs the dialysis every week. He said, you have money, sir. He said it like a man explaining why the road is closed. And then he said, and I want you to hear this exactly as he said it, because he wasn't being cruel. He was genuinely puzzled that I was upset. He said, we thought you understood. Nobody shouted. Nobody threatened me. Nane Lilia stayed inside. I never saw her. A dog barked. Somebody 2 houses down had the karaoke going already, and it was air supply. I swear to God, it was air supply. I stood in my own carport and did the arithmetic. $780,000 for the annulment. $4.2 million for the house. $900,000 for the lot. $300,000 for the tricycle and the store. About $600,000 in support over 3 years. Then the fiesta, the baptism, the tuition, the 2 hospital emergencies, the boxes, the flights. 6.4 million pesos, 2,050,000 rand. The land is hers. The house stands on her land, which under Philippine law makes it hers too. And I knew that when I poured the slab. And I want that on the record because I'm not going to sit here pretending anybody tricked me about the Constitution. I signed nothing. Not a lease, not a loan, not a mortgage, not one enforceable page in 3 years. A crane operator. 26 years. I have refused a lift over a shackle stamp. I never once walked into a courthouse that was 40 minutes down the road. I didn't stay the night. I went inside and packed the 1 bag I'd brought, which took about 4 minutes because I'd only come for 3 weeks. My toolbox was in the storeroom. I left it. I've thought about that toolbox more than I've thought about the house, which tells you something about me. Junjun came in while I was doing it. 19 years old, and he'd been driving that tricycle on a school route since March. And he stood in the doorway, and he didn't say anything because I don't think he had any words for it. I gave him the keys. I said, "It's yours. It's in your name anyway. Keep the route." I still believe that boy knew nothing. I could be wrong, but he was the only one in that house who couldn't look at me. And in my experience, the ones who can't look at you are the ones who didn't do it. Then I walked out to the road and got a habal to the terminal and a van to Tacloban. And that was the end of 3 years of my life. Nobody chased me. Nobody phoned that night. Maravich messaged twice the next day, long messages, and I read them, and I haven't replied to this day. Rock bottom was a room at a place near the airport in Tacloban with a fan that clicked. P1,400 a night. I sat on the bed with a bottle of Tanduay I didn't really want, and a pen in the back of the immigration form, and I did the sums properly for the first time. R 3.5 million? That's what I sold my whole life for in 2023. R 2.05 million gone in 3 years. About R $900,000 left. 6 years of nursing my wife, the house we bought in 2009, the Hilux, the Provident Fund from 26 years of rotations, 2/3 of it in a greenhouse in Samar with a 5,000-liter tank on a proper footing. And I laughed. That's the honest truth. Sitting on that bed at 1 in the morning with the fan clicking, I laughed like a lunatic because I thought about the salt in that load of sand. 1 load of sand, Boet. I sent 1 load of sand back because it had shells in it. Meticulous about the sand. Never phoned the court. Now I'll give you the practical part, because that's what I'd want if I were you. I went to a proper lawyer in Makati, a real one, and I paid her $15,000 for 2 hours of the truth. This is what she told me, and I'm going to say it plainly. The money is gone. Not difficult to get back. Gone. You gave it voluntarily. There's no loan document, no promissory note, no mortgage, no lease, nothing signed. In the eyes of a court, you made gifts to your girlfriend and her family for 3 years. The house is on land she owns. Under their law, whatever is built on the land belongs to the owner of the land. And no, being the man who bought the cement doesn't come into it. Estafa, that's their fraud charge. She said maybe, on the annulment money, because there we have a lie. But the receipts are Gcash screenshots and photographs of handwritten notes and cash I handed over in an office. The lawyer we'd need to charge isn't a partner anywhere, and may not be who he says he is at all. She said, 2, 3 years, more money, and you must be here for it. She wasn't discouraging me. She was giving me a load chart. And she said the thing that I will hear until I die. She said, "Sir, the Senemar is a public document. 330 pesos. Anyone can request it. $6, Boet. 6. I could have pulled that document in month 3. When she cried on that video call and told me she was married, I could have said, Of course, that's fine. Send me a copy of your marriage record. And she would have had to produce a real one or start lying about paperwork instead of feelings. 3 years and R2 to million decided by a form I didn't know existed. I didn't lay the charge. I want to explain that in one sentence, and then I'm done with it. Her mother is on dialysis twice a week in Katbalogan, and I am not going to be the reason that stops. You can call that weakness. My sister does. Maybe it is. But I plaited a woman's hair for 6 years, and I'm not built to take a machine offline just to prove I was right. So, where I am now. I'm 53. I'm back offshore, a contract off Ghana, 28 on and 28 off, running a crane on a drill ship. They took me back because good operators over 50 aren't exactly falling out of trees, and because I never let my tickets lapse. Not even in the 6 years with Marlene. Renewed them every time. I don't know why. Maybe I did know why. And here's the shameful part. And one'll say it because I said I'd be honest. I'm all right. Not happy. All right. Because somebody hands me a rotation. And the rotation tells me where my body must be for the next 4 weeks. And I don't have to decide anything. And there's a list of jobs, and I'm the man who does them. That's the same thing I was looking for on Christian Filipina in 2023. It was just cheaper this way. Our 900,000 will buy me a small flat in Vereeniging one day. Not Mossel Bay. Very Enaging. I haven't told anyone at home the amount. My sister thinks it was around 300,000. Dania knows about half of it and he doesn't push because he's not stupid. And one night on the phone he said, "Ag, Peter." And then neither of us said anything for about a minute, which is how men our age cry. Here's what I've got for you. 3 things. The first one, a confession offered early can be a lock, not a key. She told me the truth in month 3, and I filed it under honesty and never opened it again. That marriage was the door, and everything that came after went through it. If someone hands you their worst secret before you've asked, be grateful, and then go and check the secret. Both. Not one. The second. The thing that makes a story believable is nearly always the thing you're never allowed to check yourself. Somebody else goes to the lawyer. Somebody else speaks to the court. Somebody else couriers the document. It's all very kind and very helpful, and it is the whole trick. Every meeting I attended as a guest of my own case. And the third one, I have refused a lift, held up a whole deck, made myself the most unpopular man on a rig, over a 2-ton shackle with a stamp I couldn't read clearly. I never verified a marriage. That's it. That's the story. Don't be like me. Be like me at work. Yeah. No. It's fine. That's Peter's story, and it's a particular kind of painful, because he wasn't careless. He was careful about all the wrong things, a few things worth holding on to. The costs he faced were real. Annulment in the Philippines genuinely does run into hundreds of thousands of pesos, and genuinely does take years, and there really are millions of Filipinos legally married to someone they haven't lived with in decades. The family obligation was real too. The dialysis, the school fees, the eldest daughter carrying 6 people. None of that was invented for Peter's benefit. That's exactly why he couldn't see the thread of fraud running through the middle of it. The culture wasn't the con. The con hid inside the culture and used it as cover. And that distinction matters, because the answer isn't to go there assuming everyone's lying. Plenty of these stories end well. The answer is documents. The Senomar is public. It costs a few hundred pesos and takes an afternoon. Pull it yourself from the PSA in your own hands early, while it's still just paperwork, before affection has made asking feel like an accusation. If a marriage has been annulled, the annotation is on the record. If it isn't on the record, it didn't happen, no matter what certificate someone shows you. And if a court case exists, the court will tell you it exists. You can walk in and ask. And the other one, which we say on this channel more than any other, never build on land you cannot hold. Stories like Peter's are why we put this guide together. Everything we've learned from the people who've shared what went wrong, all in one place. It's in the description if it's something you need. Thanks for spending this time with us. Look after yourselves, ask for the paperwork, and we'll see you next time on Inside the Philippines.